When most people imagine nerve damage in their feet, they picture pain, tingling, burning, that classic pins and needles feeling everyone's heard about. And because that's the image we've all been given, most people assume that if their feet don't hurt, their nerves must be fine. I need to tell you something that might be uncomfortable to hear. The most dangerous form of nerve damage in your feet often doesn't hurt at all. It's not loud, it's not dramatic, it's silent, and that silence is exactly what makes it so risky. In fact, in many cases, the complete absence of any warning sensation is precisely what allows small problems to grow into serious ones, simply because nothing ever prompted anyone to look. Today I'm going to walk you through 3 specific silent signs of nerve damage that most people completely overlook precisely because they're expecting pain that never comes. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly how to check for these signs yourself in about 2 minutes using nothing but items you already have at home. Let's start with why your feet, specifically, are usually the first place this shows up, because understanding this mechanism will completely change how you think about these 3 signs. Your nerves are like electrical cables running from your spinal cord all the way out to your fingers and toes. And just like an actual cable, the longer the wire, the more opportunity there is for something to go wrong somewhere along its length. Your feet contain the longest nerve fibers in your entire body, some of them stretching over 3 feet from your lower spine all the way to your toes. This is why nerve damage caused by chronically elevated blood sugar almost always shows up in your feet first, before your hands, before anywhere else. Doctors actually call this length-dependent neuropathy, and the name says it all. The longest nerves get affected first, simply because they have the most distance, and therefore the most exposure to whatever's damaging them along the way. Now, what's actually doing the damage? We've talked before about glycation, glucose molecules attaching themselves to proteins throughout your body and stiffening tissue that's supposed to stay flexible and functional. Your nerve fibers are just as vulnerable to this process as your blood vessels are. On top of that, the tiny blood vessels that feed oxygen and nutrients directly to your nerves, called the vasa nervorum, literally the vessels of the nerves, are themselves subject to the same oxidative stress and narrowing we've discussed in relation to circulation. So your nerves are getting hit 2 ways at once. The fiber itself is being damaged by glycation, and the blood supply that's supposed to keep that fiber healthy and functioning is being restricted at the same time. Think of a nerve fiber like a very long extension cord running under your house, all the way from the breaker box to an outlet in a far corner of the basement. Now imagine that cord slowly losing its insulation over years, section by section, while at the same time the electrical supply feeding it becomes less and less reliable. At first you might notice nothing at all, the outlet still technically works, but eventually sections of that cord stop conducting signal properly. And by the time you notice the outlet has gone completely dead, the damage has usually been building quietly for a very long time. That's essentially what's happening inside a nerve fiber affected by chronically elevated glucose, a slow, quiet degradation that doesn't announce itself until a meaningful amount of function has already been lost. Here's the part that explains why this often doesn't hurt. Nerve damage typically starts with the smallest, most delicate sensory fibers, the ones responsible for light touch, subtle temperature changes, and your sense of exactly where your foot is in space. These fine fibers are usually affected before the larger fibers that carry pain signals. So in the earliest stages, you don't feel pain at all. You feel less. Sensation quietly fades out, fiber by fiber, long before anything registers as painful. By the time actual burning or tingling shows up, in many cases, a meaningful amount of nerve damage has already occurred. The absence of pain in the early stages isn't reassurance. It's often the warning sign itself, just wearing a disguise nobody's taught you to recognize. This is exactly why almost nobody catches this early. We're conditioned, culturally and even medically, to treat pain as the signal that something's wrong. No pain gets interpreted as no problem. But with this specific kind of nerve damage, the complete opposite can be true. The absence of a sensation you used to have is the actual red flag, and it's a red flag that requires you to actively go looking for it, because your body isn't going to announce it the way it announces pain, loudly and impossible to ignore. There's a second reason this gets missed so consistently. These 3 signs I'm about to walk you through are subtle enough that they blend seamlessly into daily life. You don't notice you're not feeling something the same way you'd notice a sharp new pain. Absence is much harder for your brain to flag than presence. That's not a personal failing, it's simply how human perception works, and it's exactly why we need a deliberate, specific check rather than hoping you'll just happen to notice. Let me tell you about Gerald. Gerald is 75 years old, spent over 30 years as a postal carrier, walking routes on his feet for 6, sometimes 8 hours a day, every single day for most of his working life. If anyone should know their feet well, it's Gerald. He used to joke that he knew every ache and callus on those feet better than he knew his own reflection. About a year ago, Gerald came in for a routine visit. And almost as an afterthought, he mentioned that he'd found a blister on the bottom of his foot the week before, a fairly sizable one, and had absolutely no memory of it forming. No pain, no discomfort while walking. He simply noticed it one evening while trimming his toenails and had no idea how long it had actually been there. He genuinely thought it might have appeared overnight out of nowhere, which of course isn't how blisters actually form. That detail concerned me more than almost anything else he could have said. A blister large enough to notice visually, with zero associated sensation during its formation, is a very specific signal. I performed a simple monofilament test in the office, pressing a thin, flexible nylon filament against several points on the sole of his foot, checking whether he could reliably feel it. Gerald could feel it clearly on his heel and the outer edge of his foot. But across a significant portion of his forefoot and toes, he felt nothing at all, even when I pressed firmly enough that the filament visibly bent. Gerald was stunned. He'd walked postal routes for 3 decades on those feet, and he had genuinely no idea that this much sensation had quietly disappeared. His fasting glucose was elevated, well into a range worth addressing seriously, and this silent loss of sensation turned out to be one of the clearest, most concrete signals of just how much that elevated glucose had already been affecting his body. Gerald started applying several of the approaches we've discussed on this channel: the plate method for his meals, a consistent post-meal walking habit, and closer attention to his overall glucose patterns throughout the day. He also started doing a specific foot check every single evening, which I'm about to walk you through. Nerve damage that's already occurred can be slow to reverse, and some of it may be permanent, but the goal for Gerald, as it should be for you, was preventing further damage and catching any new wounds immediately, before they became a much bigger problem. He admitted it felt strange at first, checking a body part he'd spent 30 years trusting completely, without ever really looking at it. 6 months later, he told me the evening foot check had become as automatic as brushing his teeth, and he'd caught 2 minor issues early enough that they healed without incident, simply because he was finally looking for them. Now let's walk through the 3 silent signs, one at a time, and exactly how to check for each of them yourself. Silent sign number 1, reduced ability to feel light touch, especially on the bottom of your feet and your toes. Here's a simple way to check this at home, essentially recreating what I did with Gerald using a monofilament. Take a cotton ball or even a piece of soft tissue twisted to a fine point, and with your eyes closed, have someone gently touch several spots across the bottom of your foot, your heel, the ball of your foot, each toe. You're not testing for pain. You're testing whether you can clearly and confidently feel a light touch in each of those spots. If certain areas feel noticeably duller than others, or you can't tell exactly where you're being touched, that's worth paying attention to. Do this every few months rather than just once, since a gradual decline is far easier to catch when you're comparing against your own past results. Silent sign number 2, reduced sensitivity to temperature, specifically in your feet. Many people first notice this in the shower or bath, where water that should feel clearly hot or clearly cool feels strangely muted on their feet compared to the rest of their body. A simple check is running slightly warm water over your hands first, noting how it feels, then over your feet, and paying attention to whether the sensation is meaningfully weaker in your feet. This matters beyond just comfort. Reduced temperature sensitivity is exactly how people end up with serious burns from bath water or heating pads without ever realizing it was too hot until the damage is already done. It's worth mentioning that this is also why testing bath water with your hand or elbow first rather than trusting your feet alone is a genuinely useful habit regardless of whether you're currently noticing any changes. Silent sign number 3, subtle unsteadiness or balance issues, particularly when your eyes are closed or in low light. This one surprises people because it doesn't feel related to your feet at all. It feels like a balance problem. But a significant portion of your ability to balance comes from proprioception, your nervous system's sense of exactly where your feet are positioned in space, moment to moment, without needing to look down and check. When the nerve fibers responsible for that feedback are damaged, your balance can become subtly less steady, especially in situations where you can't rely on your eyes to compensate. Closing your eyes while brushing your teeth, walking in a dark room, or standing on one foot briefly to put on a shoe. If you notice yourself needing to hold on to something for balance in situations that never used to require it, that's worth paying attention to. And it's a sign that deserves the same seriousness as the other 2, even though it doesn't feel on the surface like it has anything to do with sensation at all. So what should you actually do if you notice one or more of these 3 signs? First, do a visual foot check every single evening, the way Gerald now does. Look at the bottom of your feet, between your toes and around your heels for any cuts, blisters, redness, or areas of skin breakdown you don't remember causing. A hand mirror makes this easy even for the parts of your foot that are hard to see directly, and it takes less than a minute once it becomes part of your evening routine, right alongside brushing your teeth. Second, if you're noticing any of these 3 signs, bring it up specifically with your doctor and ask for a proper monofilament sensation test along with an evaluation of your current blood sugar control. This is a simple, quick test that gives real objective information about exactly how much sensation you have and where, rather than relying on your own subjective impression alone. Third, apply the same blood sugar management approaches we've discussed throughout this series: the plate method, eating order, post-meal walking, and attention to your overall glucose patterns. Nerve health depends heavily on stable, well-managed blood sugar over time, and while some existing nerve damage may not fully reverse, further damage is often preventable with consistent attention, which is exactly what makes catching this early so valuable. Fourth, choose footwear that protects feet with reduced sensation. If you can't reliably feel a pebble or a rough seam well fitted, protective shoes become far more important than they might have seemed before, simply because your feet can no longer reliably warn you the way they used to. Avoid walking barefoot, even indoors. If you've noticed any reduction in sensation, since it removes one more layer of protection between your feet and anything sharp or hot on the ground. And fifth, if you ever do find a cut, blister, or wound on your foot that you don't remember causing, the way Gerald did, treat that as a priority to address promptly, even if it doesn't hurt at all. The absence of pain doesn't mean the absence of a real problem that needs attention, and small wounds on feet with reduced sensation can progress far more seriously than the same wound would on a foot with normal feeling. I want to be especially clear here because this particular topic carries real weight. If you're noticing any of these 3 signs, please don't try to diagnose or manage this entirely on your own. A proper evaluation by your doctor, and often a podiatrist, is genuinely important, because wounds that go unnoticed due to reduced sensation are one of the more serious complications associated with long-term elevated blood sugar. This video is meant to help you notice these signs sooner and describe them clearly at your next appointment, not to replace a professional evaluation of your specific situation. And as always, never adjust any prescribed medication without your physician's guidance. If today's video helped you recognize something in your own feet or in the feet of someone you love who's been walking around for years assuming everything's fine simply because nothing hurts, please share it with them. Sometimes the most caring thing you can do is hand someone a 2-minute cotton ball test that could catch a real problem months or years before it would otherwise be found, long before it ever announces itself the loud way. And we are getting very close now to that sleep episode I've been building toward for weeks, the direct two-way relationship between how you sleep and how your body manages blood sugar the very next day. Once you understand how these silent signs develop in your feet, you'll start to see how many of these patterns we've covered are quietly connected to what happens overnight while you sleep. That episode is coming very soon, and I think it's going to bring everything we've discussed on this channel into much clearer focus. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next one. And tonight, when you're getting ready for bed, take 30 seconds to actually look at the bottoms of your feet before you turn off the light.